Hello, good evening, and welcome back. Following the latest protest regarding the new lockdown restrictions, which are now affecting a quarter of Britons, we've got clashes as police shut down protest over new rules. And it is tragically funny, really, in that the protesters are protesting what they view to be authoritarian regime, and saying that, hey, you're taking away our individual liberty, and therefore we're going to protest this. But in doing so, of course, they are not abiding by the law, because the law is removing their right for peaceful assembly and protesting. So in order to protest it in the first place, you're breaking the law. You get the idea. And because they're breaking the law, they are not going ahead with the agreed upon risk assessments, and therefore it is illegal, and is therefore, the legal requirement to crack down on these protests. And yes, they're calling them protests, not riots, so at least there's some sense of normalcy here. However, the protests that were participated with today did turn violent. Sure, they were mostly peaceful, and they were political protests. But nonetheless, as they say, officers used batons to control the crowd after bottles and water were thrown by demonstrators massed in Trafalgar Square. At least 3 protesters and 9 officers were injured, while 16 people were arrested. We want to keep things civil as much as possible. We really, really, really do. We're going for civil disobedience, things that do not interfere with other people's way of life, and the point is, because we don't want other people to interfere with our days of life and our work life and the things that we want to do in a day. That is the idea behind it. Violence will not get there. It is morally bad, and it is optically bad as well, put simply, and it's only going to encourage more arrests to be made, of course. Now, I do understand the thought that at some point, if your oppressors, if your government, if your bosses, owners, whoever it may be, are being overbearing and totalitarian against you, then you have to defend yourself. At that point, it doesn't become protesting, it becomes self-defense. Yeah, fully understand that. But understanding when that point is incredibly difficult, because we've seen the left adopt the same point and saying, well, hey, how we understand the situation is that there's systemic racism and police brutality against black people, and therefore our rioting and looting is self-defense, it isn't provocation or illegal. And of course, the rest of us, sane people, would disagree and say, no, that's not correct. What you're looking at is fabricated, and you're just believing race baiting, and how the hell would looting and rioting be a response to that? It really wouldn't. So, with that in mind, when we've got protests happening to maintain our individual liberties, fair enough. When it comes to physical injuries to police, that is when it gets very difficult. Ordinarily, you'd say, no, that's never acceptable. However, if they are then taking away your individual liberties despite having caused no harm to anybody, then it's just self-defense. Could the same go towards tax evasion? Then again, it becomes a very grey area, because you're not hurting anybody, you're just not allowing yourself to be stolen from like everybody else is. So at that point, are you allowed to use self-defense? The non-aggression principle, pioneered predominantly by Stefan Molyneux, who would describe himself as an anarchist, would say, then yes, of course you're allowed to use self-defense when somebody's trying to steal your property, whether that be because of a government or otherwise. But for most of us, we say, no, we've agreed with these laws, in which case, no, you can't. So does that mean that if you have a democratically elected government that then wishes to pass laws, and they do pass it within their own legal ways, that you're not allowed to break those laws at all, even if they prevent you from protesting? Exactly. And that is where you get into a incredibly grey area, and you need a very coherent moral code and philosophy in order to overcome these things. And the non-aggression principle, as flawed as it may be, or as much as you disagree with it, it does actually cover those bases perfectly well. It is very straightforward, as Stephen Molyneux says, is a way that a child could understand. That might does not mean right. And instead, it comes down to logic and reason, and evidence, and facts, and science. That is it. So in that instance, yes, these protesters are more than welcome to defend themselves, but they shouldn't have encouraged governmental police to exist in the first place. Very grey area. Very, very grey area. But, to move on to the topic in hand. The Met Police said the protest had been shut down because the crowd was not complying with social distancing. So yes, the protest cannot take place. Early on Saturday, thousands gathered in central London to protest against the latest government rules, with very few wearing masks. Funny that you're not going to follow a totalitarian law while you're protesting it. Protests are exempt from the rule of 6 restrictions, but demonstrators must social distance. Organisers must also submit a risk assessment. Rules in England limit indoor and outdoor gatherings to 6 people, with some exceptions. Yes, the exceptions being political movements that you agree with from a conservative government. It is ridiculous. So officers removed sound equipment and penned the crowd in Trafalgar Square as water and bottles were thrown at them by demonstrators, with some chanting, "Pick your side." 2 police officers required hospital treatment. Police used batons against protesters, leaving some with visible injuries. Does seem to be a bit of an overreaction. Yes. Are they concerned about people not social distancing and therefore trapping them into Trafalgar Square as in one place would only make that problem worse? Yes, of course. Do we expect their visors to be adequate facial protection? No. Do they think that it is? Maybe, but we don't know. We really don't. So, London Mayor Sadiq Khan said the reckless and violent behaviour of some protesters, the political partisanship is abhorrent, has left hard-working police officers injured, you like the police now, and put the safety of our city, which is at a critical moment in the fight against this virus, at risk. This is totally unacceptable. Yes, you're going to protest against the police until they're protecting you, at which point, oh, they're so good. You cunt. We cannot let the sacrifices Londoners have made be undermined by the selfish behaviour of a small number. Yes, that small number are called politicians. Violence of this kind towards officers will not be tolerated, and perpetrators will feel the full force of the law. So you can say that now. Where were you a couple months ago? Well, the Extinction Rebellion and Antifa and the Black Lives Matter Marxist organisation. Oh, you weren't there because you agree with them, so the law isn't applied equally? Yeah. The thing is that the Conservatives, although they're supposed to be very traditional, are quite reactionary at this point. That they say, this is what we stand for, this is what should happen. Okay, cool. And then the leftists, whether that be Labour, Greens, BLM, Antifa, Democrats, whoever it might be, will then not abide by the same rules because they don't have a shit about morals and codes and equality or anything like that. Will then change the rules that they'll abide by and say, yeah, cool, hey, we can take advantage of the Conservatives by playing by different tactics. And so they do. And the Conservatives, for the most part, just sense like, hey, you shouldn't be doing that, but we'll beat you fair and square, even though you're cheating. And they realise that this doesn't seem to be an effective tactic, in which case they'll say, fine, we're going to play you at your own game. At which point, the laws which had been ignored because it was politically expedient to support their leftist causes are then brought back around to prosecute the Conservatives. That is the normal state of things, which is why, as I say, the Conservatives tend to be more reactionary. So they aren't the provocateurs to cause this in the first place, but they will respond in kind when provoked by the left. So if the left are trying to be trailblazers, saying that this is okay, we can do this, at that point, and only at that point, will the right-wingers say, okay, fine, we will play you on your own terms. And yet the left then changed the rules again to say, no, you don't understand. It's fine when we do it, but it's wrong when you do it. There is no equality under the law when it comes to these people. Not at all. And that is why we're seeing the responses that we are seeing here. So the Met said the vast majority of crowds had now dispersed. Yippee. So, in a statement on Saturday afternoon, the Met said crowds in Trafalgar Square have not complied with the conditions of their risk assessment and are putting people in danger of transmitting the virus. That's kind of what they're protesting against, though, mate. This has voided their risk assessment, and we have informed the event organisers they are no longer exempt from the regulations. Police also confiscated a makeshift riot shield from one man. Yes, he was trying to defend himself against violent police. But, when they say this has voided their risk assessment, and we have informed the event organisers they are no longer exempt from the regulations. Again. This is to be able to enact unequal treatment under the law. It is to say, yeah, we will defend you, we will uphold the law for you, we will make sure that you're having an easy time. But those people, well, we disagree with them, so we're going to fuck them over and make their life difficult and try and prosecute them and persecute them as much as possible. It is a two-tiered legal system, and this is just yet another example of it. But, as always, let me know what you guys think down below. Always intrigued to hear what you guys have to say. And as always, until next time, have a good one.